What is up, basement dwellers? I am Mikey Henninger, and I feel like celebrating today because we have a teeny tiny little baby milestone. Because you, my friend, just tuned in to episode 10, the last time I'll be able to show it with two hands. You just tuned in to episode 10 of Inside the 20 by Basement Brewed Fantasy Football, where fantasy football players outsmart their friends and dominate their leagues using our 30-plus hours of weekly research and our totally unfair cheat sheets. And of course, our amazing, our undefeated online community, our Discord channel, where you have 300-plus other fantasy football brains that you can bounce all of your ideas and dilemmas off of. And of course, right now, it's fantasy baseball brains for you to bounce your ideas off of. I know first pitch is coming up here on Thursday, and there's a lot of you that are cramming those last-second fantasy baseball drafts. It's not too late. It is not too late for you to come over to basementbrewedff.com and join us, and you're going to get instant access to Derek Devereaux's fantasy baseball rankings, which include auction values. It's going to include access to our Discord channel, where there's, again, 300-plus other brains to bounce your ideas off of. It's not too late. Come over, join us, basementbrewedff.com. It'll literally never be cheaper than it is today to join us. But we are not here to talk fantasy baseball, at least not today. We're going to keep it locked on to fantasy football, as always. Now, if you're new to Inside the 20, if you're new to Basement Brewed Fantasy Football podcast in general, we've been discussing new faces in new places. We've been talking about head coaching changes in the NFL, offensive coordinator changes in the NFL. We've talked about free agency frenzy and what all of that means for fantasy football. So if you haven't had a chance yet, go back and check out some of those previous episodes. Most recently, we talked about Joe Mixon going to the Texans, Tony Pollard going to the Titans, Austin Eckler going to the Commanders, but we've also talked about Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Keenan Allen, Hollywood Brown, Calvin Ridley, and a bunch of other coaching changes. Go back, check out some of those former episodes. And by the way, real quickly, press pause and click subscribe, because coming out on Friday morning, Friday, March 29th, I sat down with former Tennessee Titans wide receiver, former first-round pick Kevin Dyson, the magician from the Music City Miracle, also the same wide receiver that came up just one gut-wrenching yard short of tying Super Bowl 34 in what amounted to a loss. I sat down with him on Friday morning to discuss the highs and lows of both of those plays, the details of those plays, and a lot more in between. You're not going to want to miss that episode on Friday morning. Today, in today's episode, we're going to take a quick sidebar from all of that. We're going to take a sidebar from the interviews. We're going to take a sidebar from the coaching changes, from free agency frenzy, and we're going to talk about something that I've teased in previous episodes, best ball fantasy football, or as I like to call it, the most addicting format in fantasy football if you're somebody who likes to do a fantasy football draft. We're going to talk about what it is, we're going to talk about who it's for, where to play, and a heck of a lot more. So the best possible way that I can think to describe in layman's terms what a best ball fantasy football league is that it's the one-night stand of fantasy baseball, or fantasy baseball and fantasy football. It's not just limited to football. In fact, Derek Devereaux's baseball rankings, that's a guy that had a 70% advance rate in baseball best ball last year. So again, you want access to those rankings. But fantasy football best ball drafts, they are the one night stand of fantasy football. Okay, so think about your redraft leagues, your typical leagues that you sit down and do with your buddies every year. That's like dating in fantasy football, right? You spend some time in the draft, you carefully select your mates, your team, right? You select your roster. You carefully select your mates. You spend several magical weeks together, 17 weeks that you spend together, but at the end of the football season, you go your separate ways. You don't stick with those players anymore. You move on, you draft a whole new team next year, and you do it all again. You get back out there. Then you have dynasty leagues. Now, dynasty leagues in fantasy football, they're like marriage. Okay, you carefully select your mates, and once you select those mates, those teammates, that roster, you spend the next several years nurturing those relationships through the good times and through the bad times, for better and for worse. The people you pick for your dynasty team are the people you get for the rest of your life. It's marriage in fantasy football. But best ball, one night stands. Because in best ball leagues, you select your mates, you choose multiple positions over the course of several hours, and then you never see each other ever again after that. Let me explain. So if you're somebody who loves switching positions over the course of several hours, but you don't want the commitment that comes with it afterwards, then best ball drafts are perfect for you. All right, I'll get off the metaphor here. In fantasy football terms, if your favorite part of fantasy football is doing the draft, which that's it for me personally, I love the draft. I'm all right with the other stuff that comes after, but I love the draft. Now, there's a lot of people in the world that actually hate what comes next after the draft. They hate needing to set their lineups and make those tough start-sit decisions. They hate needing to deal with waivers, adding players, dropping players, making trade decisions. They love the draft, but they hate all the stuff that comes afterwards. And by the way, you don't need to hate what comes after to love best ball. Best ball is literally just perfect for anybody who loves doing a fantasy football draft. The reason it's a little bit extra appealing for people who hate the maintenance that comes after a fantasy football draft is because in best ball, you quite literally can't do anything with your team once the draft is done. You can't add players, you can't drop players, you can't make trades, you can't even set a lineup. That's all done for you after the draft. Best ball leagues are total points leagues, so whoever has the most points at the end of the season wins. Well, that's actually, let me take a step back. That's not even fully true. Sleeper, the Sleeper app, offers best ball formats where you actually compete head-to-head, but still, you don't set lineups. You just go against an opponent, and you're automatically awarded the optimal score. By the way, if you are interested in testing out the Sleeper app, I dropped a link for you in the show notes that you can use to join Sleeper and try some of these leagues out or other daily contests. You're probably, at this point, you're wondering, okay, well, how do I score points if I don't set lineups? The way that it works is you automatically get your optimal output every single week. So after week 1 is done, after Sunday football wraps up, after Monday football wraps up, the system, whatever system you're playing on, whether it's Sleeper or Underdog or DraftKings, wherever you're playing, it's going to automatically identify for you what your best possible score would have been for that week. So if the settings are usually pretty typical, right? It's like 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 flex. Maybe defenses and kickers are thrown in there, usually not. But it's pretty typical. Let's just assume pretty typical scoring in this case. The platform that you're playing on, Underdog, Sleeper, whatever, it's going to identify for you, okay, his or her optimal lineup, the best possible lineup for this person would have been this 1 quarterback, these 2 running backs, these 3 wide receivers, this 1 tight end, etc. So let's say, for example, you have Patrick Mahomes and Derek Carr as your 2 quarterbacks, and there just so happens to be a week that Derek Carr outperforms Patrick Mahomes. He scores more fantasy points than Patrick Mahomes does. You're automatically going to get Derek Carr's points, not Patrick Mahomes' points. Okay, so you're automatically awarded your optimal output every single week. Part of what makes best ball drafts so addicting is that that's not the right word. Well, and it could be. If you have a gambling problem, if you struggle with addiction, don't mess around with best ball. Okay? I'm just going to throw that out there. But part of what makes it so fun, and part of what makes it my favorite format in fantasy football is that, first of all, you have the option to do fast drafts or slow drafts. So you can sit down at your computer for a live draft, just like you would a redraft, where it's, you're sitting at your computer for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, however long it takes. But most sites also offer slow drafts. 8 hours per pick, 4 hours per pick. So you can literally join a couple dozen at a time and just check back whenever you can, right? If you're in between meetings, you're going to the bathroom, you're laying down in bed, whatever it is, you pop open your phone, see where you're on the clock, make a couple picks, and then sign off. You don't have to lock yourself down at a computer or however you draft. You don't have to carve out a 1 hour window, a 2 hour window, or a 3 hour window. You just log in at your convenience, make your draft pick, and log out. It also can be really, really cheap and cost effective. There's some sites that have drafts as low as $1, and I've seen drafts for $3, $5, $10, and of course, there's plenty that get up, couple hundred, couple $1,000. But if you just love the thrill of the draft and you just want to play with a little bit of skin in the game, you can join a bunch of drafts for $1 at a time or $3 at a time. Just one quick thing to clarify if you're wondering how injuries work if you're not doing adds and drops. You're drafting a deep team to begin with. Okay, so for most leagues, when your draft ends after like 13 or 14 rounds, in best ball leagues, you're usually doing 20 or more rounds of a fantasy football draft so that you have space to draft 2 or 3 quarterbacks, 3 to 6 running backs, 5 to 8 wide receivers, 1 to 3 tight ends, etc. So you're drafting a much, much deeper team than you usually would, which means you need to be up to speed on depth in the NFL. You need to know you need to know NFL teams' number 3 wide receivers, their number 2 and 3 running backs. You need to have a deeper knowledge of what to expect in fantasy football, and an always shameless plug, we got you covered over at basementbrewedff.com. Join us. I'm constantly updating my rankings all the way up until kickoff in September. But that's a big part of why, there's a lot of people when they ask me, when they find out what I do for a living, they ask me, how many fantasy football leagues are you in? And I purposely, just to watch their jaw drop, I like to joke with them and say, oh, well, I actually play in over 500 plus fantasy football leagues every year. And they can't fathom it. It doesn't make any sense to them because they're used to playing in 1 to 5 leagues, and that's the max they can handle because of all the adds and drops and setting lineups and trades and all that. And then, of course, I like to backpedal and give them the caveat, well, 90% of the leagues that I do are best ball leagues, and that's where usually most of the time people ask what they are. But yeah, no adds, no drops, no trades, no setting lineups. You draft a deep team, and then the system just kind of takes care of it for you from there. If you're wondering about strategy and how drafting your fantasy football team in a best ball league is different than just your standard type of fantasy football draft, the answer is yes, it's different. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of strategy as it pertains to roster constructions and builds and stacking and which players you should pair with other players. There's a lot that goes into it. Best ball gives you an opportunity to embrace high volatility, boom bust type of players that can get you, like, think a Gabe Davis type that could get you 0, but could get you 30 plus points in any given week. Those are the types of players that they're much easier to stomach in best ball leagues. Actually, they're great to target in best ball leagues because you don't have to predict when that player is going to flop and poop the bed, and you don't have to predict when that player is going to hop on a rocket ship and take off into the stratosphere. So yes, there's a big difference in strategy when it comes to drafting a best ball team versus a regular team. We will get into all those things on the show. If you want to subscribe, we'll talk about those things as the summer goes on. We're not going to get into it today. And of course, it's always available 24/7, 365 over at basementbrewedff.com if you don't want to be sitting there waiting for one of the episodes to drop. But if you're wondering when you can play best ball, it's open now. I recognize that it's March or April, depending on when you're listening to this. Most best ball drafts open up sometimes in February after the Super Bowl, and you better believe there's a lot of people that play, myself included. In fact, I actually recommend playing best ball as early in the offseason as you possibly can, because that's where you're going to find a lot of value in the drafts, because there's a lot of players whose ADP is suppressed really, really deep because they might have question marks surrounding them going into the offseason. Think about impending free agents. Think about injuries that have happened. The draft hasn't happened yet, so a lot of people don't know where things are going to shake out, and it's a really good opportunity for you to identify really, really talented players that should be drafted higher than where they are just based on talent alone, potential landing spots. Early best ball is usually some of my most profitable best ball drafts, is when I'm doing them in March, April. I actually highly, highly recommend it. Where you can play, there's a lot of places you can play nowadays. And you're going to want to do a little bit of research on your own to understand which scoring rules, which settings, which roster formats, the prices, the rakes, right? Every company has they take their own little cut of the profit for maintenance or whatever you want to call it. But you can play on Underdog, you can play on DraftKings. I can't because I'm banned there. That's a long story. Maybe that'll be a podcast episode. Basically, I got banned because I accidentally created a second account, not even recognizing that I had a first account. I don't play on DraftKings. I play on FanDuel. And I never realized that I had a first account. And I made a second account, and they blocked me. They locked me out of both, and they won't let me back in because they think I'm trying to game the system, which I totally get. You can't be out there creating multiple accounts. But if somebody over at DraftKings would simply, like if a human would look at my activity on DraftKings, they'll see that I don't play there. That I'm not trying to game the system if I've never even played on my first account. Anyways, you can play there. You can play on DraftKings, and there's a lot of people in our, including Derek Devereaux, JJ Gosh. There's a lot of guys in our online community in the BBFF Discord channel that play on DraftKings, and yes, they share strategy. They share some of their favorite picks of the week, picks that they're avoiding. DFS is a very, very large discussion that we have in the Discord channel, including best ball. We're talking best ball right now already. You can play on Underdog. You can play on DraftKings. You can play on FanDuel. You can play on Yahoo. You can play on Drafters.com, Apex, Sleeper. We're going to leave several links for you in the show notes. If you want to check some of these out, feel free to use those links. But there's a lot of different places that you can test out best ball. Just do a little bit of research ahead of time just to make sure it's the type of format that you want to play in. Really quick example, Underdog and FanDuel, those are half-point PPR leagues, whereas DraftKings is a full-point PPR league. So depending on what you prefer to play in, that's something for you to keep in mind. And of course, there's quite literally no better time than right now to press pause, go to basementbrewedff.com, or just use the link that's in the notes, and join us. Like, it literally won't be cheaper than it is right now. People who sign up in March get access to everything much cheaper than people who sign up in April and May and June and July and August. Literally waiting until fantasy football season is going to cost you $20 more. The best part about that is, by the way, when you do sign up, you're locked into that rate. You're locked into that cost despite prices going up. I still have people from when I first started this thing that are paying me $1 per month. Okay? But it's not too late. In fact, now's the perfect time. You better believe we're talking best ball all the time at basementbrewedff.com. We're talking about it in the Discord channel. I build best ball rankings. I'm working on the 2024 draft guide. I'm working on 2024 best ball rankings. Those rankings, by the way, they're built off of me doing 300 to 500 real drafts, real best ball drafts. Okay, it's not just me like creating rankings and naming players that I think are going to be good. I take ADP into account. I look at where certain players are going to be drafted ahead of who, how frequently you can get, wait and grab a player or a certain position later. The draft guide is built off of me doing 300 to 500 very real drafts every single year. And I'm updating that baby all throughout the summer leading up until kickoff. 30 plus hours of weekly research where I'm giving you notes and previews of what to expect from every single player on every single team in the draft guide. If you want to know about Joe Mixon, if you want to know about Calvin Ridley, if you want to go way deeper and know about Van Jefferson, you click on his name and you're going to find a preview of what to expect from Van Jefferson in 2024 fantasy football. Again, I'm creating these all summer. I'm maintaining these all summer, and you're going to get access to every single thing that we do, whether it's best ball rankings, the 2024 draft guide. I'm going to have rookie rankings coming out here shortly for Dynasty League players. Every single thing that we do is available in the subscriptions on basementbrewedff.com. And again, signing up in March is going to be $20 cheaper than if you wait to sign up in August when it's quote-unquote fantasy football season. So, you can wait until August when it's $20 more expensive, or why don't you just go ahead and sign up right now and then take that $20 and treat yourself to some buffalo wings, extra crispy, extra ranch, not blue cheese. I like blue cheese, but ranch is superior when it comes to buffalo wings, no doubt about it. That's all I got for you today. Hopefully this gave you a good, quick understanding of what a best ball league is and why they're so much fun and why I recommend doing them now sooner than later. But come back on Friday morning for the big one. Grab a cup of coffee, a cup of decaf, whatever you need, but come back because we're doing the big one. We're doing the interview with Dr. Kevin Dyson. We talked about the Music City Miracle. We talked about coming up 1 yard short of tying the game in Super Bowl 34. We talked about the emotions that one feels as a human being on the very high end of that roller coaster of winning that Music City Miracle and winning that game as the time expired versus the basement bottom feeling of that roller coaster of coming up one dreadful yard short of tying the Super Bowl, the biggest stage of your career, and then the 6 months that followed. We talked about him and his brother being the first to score touchdowns in an NFL game. We talked about a lot during Kevin Dyson's NFL career. And by the way, jersey giveaway, baby. One lucky winner is going to get this sweet, sweet, sweet Music City Miracle jersey autographed by number 87, Mr. Kevin Dyson himself. This jersey is courtesy of Greg Spencer and BS Collectibles in Twin Lakes, Wisconsin. And one lucky winner gets it. The details have already been revealed. Go over to my Twitter or X or whatever the heck it's called. Go to my LinkedIn. If you're on the newsletter, if you're not on the newsletter, that link is in the comments in the show notes. If you're following me on TikTok, it's over there. If you can't find it, drop a comment on this video. We'll get you the details. There's a lot of different ways you can enter to win that Music City Miracle jersey, including, by the way, if you do sign up for a subscription at basementbrewedff.com, you get 5 entries into that raffle. There's a lot of ways that you're going to put yourself in a position to win this autographed Kevin Dyson jersey. That's all I got for you today. Come back on Friday morning for that interview. And as you know, between now and then, I'll be in the basement. I will be updating the 2024 Fantasy Football Draft Guide. I'll be updating the best ball rankings and everything that you're going to need to outsmart your friends and dominate your leagues in 2024. We'll see you on the fantasy football field on Friday morning. Cheers. This brew's for you.